everyone. Thank you for joining us for our CSCB Coffee Hour this morning. Today, we're joined by Mia Gonzales, who is the Budget Program Administrator for local governments and the Department of Local Affairs. And she will be giving a refresher of conservation district budgets, upcoming deadlines, and what needs to be filed with the division. And so Mia said she could field some questions during the presentation. So if any come up, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat, or we will also save time for the end for a Q&A. So we'll also have that opportunity as well. And so thank you, Mia, for joining us this morning, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kayla. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. As Kayla mentioned, I am Mia Gonzales, and I'm the Budget Program Administrator for the Division of Local Government, which is under the Department of Local Affairs. Some of you may have already met me and seen this presentation earlier this year. This is Budget 101, so this will pertain to the local government budget law, particularly as it relates to conservation districts. So much of this presentation is going to be very similar, if not the same content that if you attended in March, have seen before. So this is really just a refresher, and particularly as upcoming budget deadlines in the next couple of months are coming our way. Here's an overview of what I'll be covering this morning. First, we'll talk about the purpose of a budget and then the components of the budget, as well as the budget process calendar and a brief overview of budget amendments, and then how you can file your budget as well as any amendments to the division. And as Kayla had mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, or you're more than welcome to just chime in, and I'm happy to answer at any point. I'll definitely take a couple of moments between some of these slides to ask if there are any questions as well. But before I really get into the budget law, I did just want to give a brief overview too of the Department of Local Affairs, which is one of the smaller state agencies, and what we have to offer to local governments in the state. I mentioned that I'm part of the Division of Local Government, but we are really only just one of 4 divisions in the department. We also have the Board of Assessment Appeals, as well as the Division of Housing and the Division of Property Taxation. The services that we offer under the Division of Local Government include financial assistance, technical assistance, regional services, and the Colorado Resiliency Office to help support local governments in the state. I actually did pull up our website, which I did want to take a moment to show as well, where you can find all of these resources. If you've ever been on our website, it may look a little bit new. They've just made some changes in the last couple of months, but you'll be able to find all of our resources and information about funding programs here, how you can apply for, and what type of grants we actually offer that might be pertinent. And then training and technical assistance, such as my presentation this morning. If you have any other questions, you can look it up here, and we have a resource here for our regional services, which is primarily serviced by our regional team, who are located across the state in different parts and have local offices there. And then our Colorado Resiliency Office, as well as our other recovery, rebuilding, and resiliency services. And of course, as I had mentioned before, any filing and reporting actions that you need will be available here at the top too. If you're interested in any of the other divisions that are part of our department, you can also find them under that tab called DOLA. And currently, we as the division are actually are responsible to have a repository and inventory of all active local governments in the state, including what they are statutorily required to file with the division. So because of this, we have records for all of the active local governments on that website that you see there. Currently, there are 4,688 active local governments. Since I've presented this for conservation districts in March, we've actually added about a little bit over 100 local governments in less than a year. So the state is growing pretty rapidly. As you can see from that chart, I know it's a little bit hard to read, but those are the types of local governments that we have in the state. And that long bar that you see are actually comprised of Title 32-1 metropolitan districts. Of these 4,688 local governments, about 4,100 are subject to the local government budget law. So what is the purpose of a budget? Well, I think in more simplified terms, we like to think of it as revenues and expenses or dollars and results. But it really is more than just numbers. It is a tool to help you communicate with your community about your financial health, your priorities, and how you're planning to get there. So the budgeting process is actually outlined in the Colorado Revised Statutes. So while complying with this statute, which is for reference, it's under Title 29, Article 1, which most folks will commonly just refer to it as the budget law. Local governments are going to be producing several components that make up the annual budget filing that needs to be filed with the division at the end of each January. So more than likely, you've already started the process. You've presented your budget. Throughout the year, you're going to be doing things, taking actions or whatnot to get to this final product that you'll be submitting to the division, as well as to your constituents as well. The budget law defines that all these folks that you see here in this first statutory reference, any authority, county, municipality, political subdivision, or district needs to comply with this budget law. Political subdivisions here are going to be things like your urban renewal authorities, your downtown development authorities, and your business improvement districts. There are exceptions to who does need to comply, and those include state authorities. So your Colorado Sheep and Wool Authority, the Beef Council, school districts are also exempt from the budget law because they actually have a separate act that they need to follow. And home rule municipalities also don't necessarily need to comply with all of the local budget law requirements, but they do still need to file a budget for purposes of information and research. And of course, conservation districts. So one of the first statutes in the budget law requires two things as you are creating your budget. It is a budget message and a financial plan. So your budget schedules essentially. Breaking this down, a budget message is really a written message that describes the important features of your proposed budget, including a statement of the budgetary basis of accounting used, and then a description of the services to be delivered during the budget year. So it's essentially going to be, when you put your entire budget packet together, it's going to be the introductory narrative to the rest of your budget. You'll see here, though, that important features is not defined. within the law. So it's really going to be a local choice of what you determine to be an important feature. The basis of accounting is going to be either cash or modified accrual or accrual. I think for most conservation districts, you're all operating on either a cash or modified accrual basis. And noting what basis of accounting you're using is really going to help the public understand the numbers, while the description of the services is going to help the public understand how resources are being allocated for that budget year. And we do offer a template for this. I think you'll be able to also find it from Nikki or Kayla or Garth if you request some of these templates specific to conservation districts. You'll see, if you don't already use this already, a budget message template that really in 3 sections outlines everything that you need to meet this statutory requirement for a budget message. So the first part, section 1, you'll tell us what are the important features, which for conservation districts, it's pretty straightforward. If you have a mill levy, which I think the majority of conservation districts probably don't, but if you do have one, that's probably important to note here. And if you don't, you can simply just put 0. What are your other revenue sources? So in this, excuse me, in this example here from Baca County Conservation District, they list that part of their revenue source is rental income, seed sales, and grants. It can just really be that straightforward. It doesn't have to be a formal paragraph. Your expenses can simply say payroll, project upkeep, and then any other points that you feel should be addressed, that you feel the public might want to know, can go at the bottom of that first section, describing some explanatory budget notes. For instance, in this example, for this conservation district, they actually noted that they had decreased expenditures. Section 2 is going to be where you just check mark which accounting basis that you're going to be using for the budget year. In this example, it's cash basis. The last section is going to be the services that you provide. So for most conservation districts, you'll be able to find the services that you offer in this checklist. But of course, if there's something else that you provide for the district that's not listed, there's going to be a small section at the bottom for other. So then, aside from the budget message, you'll also need to show your budget schedules. That's part of the budget packet that you'll be filing with the division as well. Your budget schedules are most likely going to be something that you work on throughout the year. But it is a requirement for the budget law to have some specific features in these budget schedules. So it does need to be by fund or by spending agency. So for conservation districts, you'll most likely only have 1 fund account, maybe 2. Most of the time, though, I don't see more than 2. Your primary fund account will likely be your general fund account for all of your expenditures and revenues. We do need to see a beginning and ending fund balance, and then 3 years of data. So your prior year actuals, your current year estimates, and then your budgeted numbers. So what we would be talking about for your 2024 budget is we'll need to see the 2022 actuals, the 2023 estimates, and then the numbers for your 2024 budgeted. This is an example from Bent Conservation District. So this is for their 2023 budget. We'll see at the top that they do have columns for their 2021 prior year actuals, their estimated 2022, and then what they budgeted for 2023. They have a beginning balance, and then they list their revenues. And what is really great here is that they do have a line item for their grants. And then it continues by showing their expenditures and then also their ending balance at the bottom there. So the ending balance, just underneath there, we can see that the emergency reserves are also called out. They have, of course, by Tabor, you need to have at least 3% in reserves. So this is always great to see. It's not statutorily required to be shown, but it really is the most transparent. And it's a great opportunity to show that the district is in compliance. And typically at this point, we are usually often asked how detailed these budget schedules actually need to be. The budget law doesn't specify that. They just say you need to show your revenues and your expenditures. So because there's no specific criteria, you might have an accountant or a financial staff member that will likely have some input on the level of line item designation. But generally speaking, expenditures don't need to be in great detail. They just need to be, the spending just needs to be confined to the line items. Excuse me. So yours for expenditures might look much shorter than this. It could be much longer than this. But you'll just see, if you can't see, but I'll also go through it. They have expenditures for matching grants, stimulus, a noxious weed program, sales tax, meeting expenses, which is just for meals, travel, and separate from annual meetings. There's a line item for professional services, donations, dues and subscriptions, education outreach. There's a line item here that calls out spending for elections, which I know in 2024 there won't be one. Payroll expenses, unemployment insurance, and workman's comp insurance. Those are all great to probably separate as each individual line item. Other things like fuel expenses, maintenance, fencing, janitorial, cleaning supplies, insurance, utilities, internet service, and office supplies. I think it really is a local determination, what works for you, what is the easiest way for you to be able to keep track of these expenditures is going to be the best way. Are there any questions so far about the budget message or budget schedules? Okay. And if you think of something towards the end of the presentation or down the line, just feel free to chime in and ask. So by now, most of you have probably already prepared a draft budget. This did need to be prepared and introduced to your board by October 15th of each year. And notice should have been published to have a budget hearing at this point. The notice needs to have included, this is a template, it's also available on our website or from Nikki, but it needed to have the date, the time, and the location of where the budget hearing was going to be, or is going to be if it hasn't happened yet. And it needs to have an explicit statement that says that any interested elector of the district may be able to inspect the draft budget and file any objections to the budget before the budget is adopted. And they should be able to also do that during the hearing as well. And it should have been published in a local newspaper if your budget is greater than $50,000. If it is $50,000 or less, then it just needs to be posted in 3 public places within the boundaries of your district. And so once you have the budget hearing, or you can also even adopt your budget during the hearing, and if any revisions need to be made, after all of that process, the board needs to take formal action to do really 3 things. It needs to formally adopt the budget, make appropriations, and then also set the mill levy. So after, and only if that's applicable to your conservation district, will a mill levy need to be set. And best practice is to set that mill levy by resolution as well. The resolution can look like this. Again, this is a template specific to conservation districts. So at the bottom, essentially, is the formal action to adopt the budget. At the top, you're going to really just be filling out the name of your conservation district, who was the budget officer that was appointed to prepare the budget, and that person can be anyone that the board has designated to do that. When was the public budget hearing held? And then at the bottom there, it just needs to have the date and month and year that it was adopted and signed by the president and treasurer of the board. This is the example to appropriate. So again, this is, you are needing to appropriate your spending limits. So you do need to assign a specific amount that you are going to be spending for each fund or spending agency. So if you only have one fund, if you only have the general fund, then you're going to be appropriating the amount that you're going to be spending for 2024, for instance, from the general fund. So here's an example. The ones that I've highlighted here, you can see in yellow. This is for one fund. This is for the general fund. You would appropriate your estimated expenditures. So if, for instance, I know that my estimated expenditures is going to be $1,000, I'll write here $1,000. And what some local governments will do is they will add on an additional appropriation in the event that your expenses might exceed what you've expected for that year. And so in this example, we're just going to add on $200. And so the total amount that we're appropriating for 2024 is going to be $1,200. This additional appropriation is a local choice. I would think that it could be a good practice if you consistently see every year that you're going to be over a little bit or however much than what your estimated expenditures are. But also, it's important to note, and we'll discuss more about this later, but budget amendments are based on what's appropriated. So if you appropriate only $1,000, but then something comes up and you need to amend the budget to increase that appropriation, you're going to have to go through the statutory process to amend the budget, which will include a budget hearing, adopting a resolution, posting it, or publishing it in a newspaper. So a lot of local governments will try to take a preemptive step and provide an additional appropriation. If you have any other fund accounts that needs to be appropriated, then you can continue to fill this bottom section. Sorry. And then once you've made the appropriations, again, you're going to sign this resolution by the board president and treasurer. And if you need it, there is also a template for the mill levy. Excuse me. If you do not have a mill levy, you do not need to fill out this form. If you do have a mill levy, then section 1 basically sets that mill levy, excuse me, what the mill levy is going to be for that year. And then section 2 essentially says that they've authorized, the treasurer has authorized the certification of the mill levy to the county. But again, if you don't have one, this is not a resolution that needs to be filled out and adopted. So all of these materials that I've just shown, the budget message, the budget schedules, and the resolutions, they will all be combined into a single PDF, and that is what you're going to be filing to the division by January 31st. Typically, the person that's assigned as the budget officer will most likely be the one that files these components. But I understand that with conservation districts, you might have one person that has to file all of the filings for your district, and that's perfectly fine too. And we'll talk about at the end of the presentation how you can e-file it as well. But before I move on, are there any questions about the resolutions or the templates? Okay. So the budget process calendar is, there's some key deadlines that are particularly important towards the end of the year, but really your own local government's processes, they might actually start much earlier than the fall. But by the budget law, most of the statutory deadlines are going to start on October 15th, which is when the budget officer needed to present the proposed budget and start publishing or posting the notice for a budget hearing. And then if you have a mill levy, that mill levy should be certified by December 15th to the county, but before that mill levy can be certified to the county, the budget needs to be adopted and appropriations need to be made before December 15th. If you don't have a mill levy, then you have all the way through the end of the year, December 31st, to adopt the budget and make appropriations. So the General Assembly acknowledges that a lot can change from adopting the budget in October, November, December to the rest of your budget year. Sometimes it can be brought to your attention by an audit or when you get unanticipated revenue. But there's really 4 circumstances where you would need to statutorily amend the budget. And the first 2 is when, as I mentioned before, expenditures are going to exceed appropriations. When you need to spend, when spending needs to go above the spending limit that you've set for that year. So this chart here shows the different types of amendments. The first is the transfer amendment, which is moving money from one appropriated fund to another. So again, you might only have one fund, but if you have 2 or 3, and you needed to move money, for instance, from your general fund to a capital fund, then that would trigger a budget amendment by the budget law. So that means you would have to publish a notice for a public hearing, conduct that hearing, and then adopt a resolution and file that with the division. The second one, which is the supplemental, so to your far corner right here, that's when you're receiving unanticipated revenue that you want to spend in that budget year. So for instance, receiving ARPA funds. Statutory requirement is the same as a transfer amendment. You have to publish a notice, have a public meeting, adopt a resolution to file it with us. If you receive unanticipated revenue, but you don't want to spend it in that year, or maybe you're going to get that unanticipated, like a grant that you didn't expect. Maybe you're getting one now and you don't want to go through the process of a budget amendment and you can wait to spend it in 2024. You can certainly do that. You can hold on to that unexpected grant and budget it for 2024 instead of having a budget amendment now. But just keep in mind that at any point when you need to spend more than what you appropriate, you'll need to have a budget amendment. The other two at the bottom here, the revision is actually a reduction of what's been appropriated for the budget year. This is very rare. The best example that we have come across is if a local, excuse me, if a local, like for instance, a Walmart or something similar shuts down and either someone on your staff or your board recommends an amendment. This is an optional budget hearing. It's an optional resolution to adopt. Excuse me. The last one is a contingency amendment. So this is in the case of an emergency. So a governing body can authorize the expenditure of funds in excess of the appropriation by a resolution. So an example would be if there's an unanticipated repair project and it requires that you dip into your reserves. You would have to adopt a resolution at a public meeting. You wouldn't need to go through publishing a notice or posting a notice, but you still need to adopt a resolution and file that with division. This emergency amendment, the term emergency is not clearly defined in the budget law. So in these instances, if you find yourself in one, we always recommend, if it's feasible, to reach out to an attorney. You definitely want to outline what is the emergency, at the very least in meeting minutes, but I would also recommend in a resolution. The threshold, I think, is really what would stop or prevent services continuing for your district, for your constituents, that would require you to dip into your reserves. So that's the way that I typically try to frame that mindset of what would be considered an emergency. If you need a computer, for instance, and need to dip into your reserves to purchase that computer, is that because without that computer, you can't provide services, you can't get onto, your platforms or your systems without the purchase of that computer, then I would probably consider that a contingency. So, but again, that's something that definitely needs to be well thought out and most likely also looped in with an attorney for the district if that's feasible. So were there any questions about these budget amendments? Okay. So I'm going to wrap up just by showing what um, e-filing will look like in January. We have an e-filing portal. If you don't have an account yet, you'll be able to set one up through our website, or you can also just email me and I'm more than happy to set you up with an account. Um, you'll be able to click on a link here on our website. It'll take you to a Google form and you'll just fill it out, and someone from our staff will be able to give you login details if you don't already have one. You'll know that you're in the right portal by looking at the top and seeing local government e-filing portal. We do have a couple of other portals in the division. One is called the grants portal and the other is called the formulaic distributions portal. So just make sure that when you're e-filing your budget or any other items that you need to file with us, such as an annual report or their supervisor's list or election results, that you're seeing local government e-filing portal at the top. If you ever forget your password, there's a link here at the bottom that'll reset it for you. Once you log in, you'll see this main summary, this review screen of your contact information. You can change your password using that key icon that you see. After you're done reviewing your contact information, it'll take you to a summary tab. And from here, you can see the status of your documents, but you won't be able to take any action on this summary tab. You actually need to click on the tab that you're trying to file for. So if you're trying to file for elections, there's the elections tab. If you're trying to file for a budget, you're going to go to the budget tab. Clicking on that budget tab will take you to all of the budget filings that have been filed for your district and what has been accepted. To add a due document, there's going to be an add document button there to your right, where you can then choose an annual budget or budget amendment. The other two is if you have a mill levy, and you can file the certification that you've submitted to the county, which is the certification of tax levies. That third option there. The last one won't pertain to conservation districts. Once you choose a document type, you'll upload it, and then it'll ask you to continue on to this screen, which shows your document that you've uploaded, and then selecting the date in which you've adopted the budget and what budget year is it for. If there's anything you need to explain, you can add that in the comments and notes section. You're going to click continue, and it's going to take you to a review screen. So if this is a double submission process, you click continue, and then you click submit document here. Without doing those two steps, your budget or budget amendment won't get to us to review. There is a statement right before you hit that submit document button that basically says, you're certifying that this is a true and accurate copy of your budget. All budgets and all documents that you file through the e-filing portal are going to be publicly available in what we call the local government information system. So this is where you see all the records of all local governments that I mentioned that are active in the state. And, when you look at the website, you'll see that there's a column for view filings, and that's where most folks will be able to see when it's been publicly available after our staff has accepted the document. And I just want to wrap up with a quick overview of some of our resources. I mentioned our website already. Um, there is a budget website, a specific budget website that lists the important dates, resources. There's a great guide for budget amendments that goes more extensively than the overview that I just did here. We have sample forms on here, but I would strongly advise to just go on the website that that Kayla has posted here in our chat and use those forms there. These sample forms that you see on the budget website are not specific just to conservation districts. So it might be a little confusing and it might not work for you. So again, just go to the link that Kayla has on the chat. If you're interested in some other resources, there are quite a few that offer webinars and guides and best practice materials, including the Government Finance Officers Association, uh, even ICMA, the City and County Managers Association, or even CML. Even as conservation districts, um, it might still be helpful to kind of see what others are offering if it's of interest to you. But I know that Nikki and her team are so great at providing and supporting conservation districts. So I'm sure you'll be able to get any information and all information from them directly. But I did just want to provide this in case anyone had any interest in looking to see what are some resources that even our staff uses for reference as well. So with that, that is my contact information. I will provide this slide deck to Kayla and Garth so that they can share that with you too. Um, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or if you want to email me directly or even give me a call, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Mia. That is so helpful in just having the budget refresher if you're new to conservation districts or even kind of like a seasoned veteran, if you will. It's just always really helpful to have that refresher. And even I appreciated like the screenshots walking through the portal and just making sure folks are being able to like double check and click on what they need to click to make sure that their budgets are submitted. All super helpful information. And so, yeah, any questions for Mia today while we have her here with us? And I did, just while folks are maybe thinking of one, just for clarification, when districts have to do a supplemental budget amendment, when they got like an extra grant and they are planning on spending that money within that budget year, they have to do the supplemental amendment. But if they receive the grant and they're not wanting to spend that money until the next budget year, do they still have to do the amendment or are they okay?
They're okay. They
Okay.
won't need to do an amendment only for the year that they would want to spend it. So
Okay.
that probably was more confusing. So no, if you want to spend it in 2024, hold on to it. No budget amendment is needed. Just include it in your 2024 budget.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Other questions for Mia? Okay. And just one more little comment for folks to kind of think about if they have any questions. We will not be having, we're taking a little break for our coffee hours. So this is our last one for November, and we're going to be taking a break in December. But please keep an eye out for on your emails. We're going to be sending out a survey for possible coffee hours that you'd like to see in 2024 and what we can offer going forward. And so we would love that feedback from the districts. And so that said, one more call for questions for Mia. We so appreciate you having you today, Mia. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule. And we'll be sure to post this recording on our website, and then also send out the slide deck like she had said, and I'll share Mia's contact information as well. And then also encouraging the districts to reach out to your regional field specialists for any other questions that you may have. And so double checking the chat, I don't see anything, so we will go ahead and wrap up today. Thanks everyone. So appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.